Okay, so critical race theory is what we're moving into now. And so there are, so critical race theory is, comes out of the legal studies. And it started roughly in the early mid-90s. And it has now permeated most fields in academia. And so it's an excellent way to begin studying race. What they do has, and the research that has come out of critical race theorists has really shifted the way we understand race to reflect more accurately how race and racism function. And so there are, it's not really a methodology in the way that other fields have methodologies. It's more of a thematic approach. And so we actually like a thematic approach. And so there are several themes that we want to highlight for our work here in practicing anti-racism that we think are important from critical race theory. And so the first is that racism is normal, that racism is part of how our society operates. Like, it's just the normal way our society operates. And so this, one of the things that this means is that racism is the common everyday experience of most BIPOC folks. And so for us as white people, we usually think of racism as something that rears its ugly head every now and then. But most of the time, otherwise, it's not a problem. And so that's wrong. That's what critical race theorists have pointed out, that racism is actually normal, not aberrational is what they say. The second is interest convergence. Oops, okay, we ordered those differently.
It's fine.
Okay, so interest convergence. And this is the idea that anti-racist movements tend to make progress when it is in the best interests of those in positions of power, not necessarily due to moral persuasion. So the example that's used, like the classic example, is the Civil Rights Act and the Civil Rights Movement. And so what critical race theorists have pointed out with the Civil Rights Act is that it wasn't only the civil rights activists and their efforts that gained the signing of the Civil Rights Act. Another critical aspect of this were white political elites and the interests of the United States on the world stage. So at this time in the late 60s, the US was involved in Vietnam and the Cold War. And so trying to spread democracy around the world, and it's hard to spread democratic ideals around the world when a major swath of people within the US don't have access to the basic rights that democracy requires to function well. And so this made the US on the world stage look very hypocritical. And so signing the Civil Rights Act was a way to reckon for political whites, or like elite political whites, for them to reconcile that hypocritical problem on the world stage. And so interest convergence then was the interests of the civil rights activists trying to gain, access to the democratic process, really, to gain access to civil rights, and then political elite whites wanting to appear like democracy was important. And so that's interest convergence. And then intersectionality, which is what's coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a legal theorist. And this came out of her experience as a Black woman moving in within the Black community, working for racial justice, and then within mostly white feminist circles working for to end sexism for gender equity. And so what she realized in her experience as a Black woman is that working with white feminists, she could be a woman, but she couldn't be Black, because there's a racism problem with white feminists, ignoring the concerns of Black women. And then within Black communities working for racial justice, she could be Black, but she couldn't be a woman because of the sexism within those circles at the time. So there was no place where she was allowed to be her full self, where she could be fully human. And so intersectionality is the idea that we have these complex intersecting identities, and that a key aspect of this is the power dynamics involved with the way our identities intersect. And so while I, as a white male, might say, well, aren't issues of gender, race, and sexual identity and ability all separate things, these are not actually separate things for someone who inhabits all of those identities. And so the way those intersect is an important source of meaning making and is important to consider. And then the other theme that we want to draw attention to is the centering of the voices and experiences of BIPOC folks. And so what's important about this can be a hard one for us as white people to practice because we're used to having our voices centered and our experiences centered. And it can feel uncomfortable when we start to decenter that. And so I want to talk a little bit about this. So the first aspect of this is that centering the experiences of BIPOC folks needs to not involve tokenizing or singling them out for their perspectives. So whether or not an individual person of color chooses to share their experience is their choice and must be respected. So, I mean, an easy way to think about this is, you know, if you think about a time in your life where you went through some difficulty, you don't exactly want to be singled out in a group of strangers to share that time. That can be kind of rough. So it's that kind of idea that the agency and autonomy is of people is important to respect in this process.